I want to thank everyone for joining us. Sorry about all of the another Yiddish word, mishigas, craziness this morning or it's afternoon.
Is this Yiddish 101, Nancy?
This is what happens to me when I get stressed. The Yiddish comes out, and
Okay,
I
it's verkakte. That's all good.
exactly, and I do not know. Oh, Laurel's texting now. Can somebody send her the link, please? Laurel Cudden. Um, I don't know a lot of Yiddish, but the little I know comes out when I'm stressed. So, as you might have figured, Zoom or not figured out, Zoom canceled our meeting today, so the link didn't work, so we're starting again. I want to welcome everyone for joining us.
Here we go.
To Learning to Love the Money Conversation and 7 Negotiating Mistakes to Avoid with our guest presenter, Ilise Benun. This is our third On the Fly workshop, which is a series of deep dives into the skill sets and knowledge critical to growing our businesses. I'm Nancy Russo. We have a bunch of our co-leaders on today. Laura Mignot, I don't know where everybody is, Felicia Stingone, Shweta Vikram, and I think that's all that's on right now. Laurel is coming on and Carol can't join us. For those of you who are new to Fly Female Founders, we're an educational nonprofit focused on helping women build successful businesses centered around inspiration, education, and connection. We were founded in 2015 and now have a 1,000 person and growing community of small business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, consultants, freelancers, and side hustlers from a broad range of industry sectors who are primarily based in New York City, but since we went online, we've got people from all over. We have another workshop coming up on February 19th, Differentiation and Positioning, Evaluating, Defining, and Landing on Ways to Differentiate Your Firm or Services Within a Highly Saturated Market with Emily Cohen. And we have not announced this officially yet, but on December 15th, we are having a speed networking holiday event, our gift to the community. We did one in the end of October, and it was amazing. So Laurel has to stop texting me. I would like to now introduce my business coach, Ilise Benun. Ilise is the founder of marketingmentor.com, marketing-mentor.com.
Thank you for the hyphen.
Yes, the go-to online resource for creative professionals who want better projects with bigger budgets, through which she offers business coaching to small groups, of which I'm in one, and one-on-one coaching as well. She's also a national speaker, author of 7 books, including The Creative's Professional Guide to Money and 3 online courses via Creative Live, all tailored to the needs of creative professionals. Since 2008, she has hosted the Marketing Mentor podcast, which I listen to religiously, and her newest project role is a business coach for the Savannah College of Art. And Ilise, I will breathe now and let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy, for the invitation and to join you and this group, which I also have heard all about over the last couple of years. So I'm really glad to be able to participate. Finally, I just want to give y'all I live in Savannah now, so I can say that, give y'all a little overview of what I have in mind today, which I tend to be kind of fluid and change things up as I go. I do have a plan, but we may not adhere to my plan. So what I have in mind is to present some ideas, and I'll show a little PowerPoint while I do that. And then we'll have a little discussion, and then I'll present some more ideas, and then maybe we'll do some breakouts based on those ideas, and just kind of back and forth that way. That's my plan. I want it to be as interactive as possible. I love facilitating discussion. And I know, Nancy, you had said originally that you were going to moderate. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of when the discussion happens. I'm happy to moderate the discussion as we go. Do you want to? How do you usually do that? You're muted.
Just unmuted myself. Whatever way you want to do it. That's
okay. Great. Yeah. All right. So let me then share my screen. Okay, you need to enable me, please.
Yeah, well, normally we set that up ahead of time, don't we?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you should be all set.
All right. All right, hold on. It still is telling me it's disabled, of course.
It's telling me you are co-host.
It looks like you just made Felicia the co-host, not me.
Oh, yeah, right, I did.
You know,
You
one of the best presentations I ever gave was the time my PowerPoint just totally didn't work and I had to wing it.
Yeah.
And that is a possibility, but I'm not going to have to wing it, right?
Well, Zoom canceling things just throws me like crazy. So.
All right, here is my PowerPoint. All right, and I'm just going to walk through this, and I'm going to minimize everything. So if you need my attention, just call me. So this presentation has several different titles, but the one I'm using today is Learning to Love the Money Conversation. But someone recently called it the Show Me the Money Talk, which I liked. So we're going to use that. And I don't need to introduce myself, but I will just tell you that I am a business coach that works exclusively with what I call creative professionals. And I like it when people self-identify as creative. It's not up to me to say who is or isn't creative. So if you consider yourself a creative, then I might be able to help you. So I always like to start with some big ideas. And the first one is that if you don't love the money conversation, you should know that you're not alone, because 43% of Americans don't know how much money their spouse makes. Wow. And 53% of men are more comfortable asking about salary than women. So clearly we have some work to do. And I, over my now 32 years working as a consultant and eventually a coach, I have noticed, because I work with a lot of women, that as women, we often discount and dismiss our own accomplishments and capabilities before we even get to the negotiating table. And I do believe that we can change that. And I'm on a bit of a mission to change that. So I want to start with the fact that I love the money conversation. I didn't always love the money conversation, but I certainly do now. And I have a few ideas why. One is that it puts me in a position of strength. When I lead the money conversation with anyone, it definitely puts me in a position of strength, because most people don't like it. Even the clients or the people you're talking to, they don't usually like it either. It also makes me come across as confident, even if I don't feel confident in the moment. And I think that speaks to the fact that the feelings of confidence don't come first, the actions of confidence do, and then the feelings follow, and it takes practice and repetition for this to work. But if you pretend, if you do confident, then you may feel confident. I also think that leading the money conversation, initiating the money conversation shows my professionalism, and it makes it easier for my collaborators and my clients and my partners to engage in that conversation as well. And I also think it makes them feel taken care of when you initiate the conversation and confidently talk about money, and know when to stop talking about money too is an important element of that. And finally, I am so much more likely to get what I need when I love the money conversation. So I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, some of you may love the money conversation a little bit more. Maybe some of you already do. We can talk about that. In fact, maybe we should talk about that first. I would love to hear from people. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The question is, do you love the money conversation? Why or why not? Let's just have a little conversation about that. So the way I like to facilitate is raise your hand if you want to say something, either the electronic hand or your real hand, because I think I can see everyone here. So Felicia.
I used to hate the money conversation, but then I found working with a partner, I actually saw myself through by watching her and realizing that we were almost embarrassed to ask for money, and we weren't being paid enough, and it was actually causing a problem.
Mhm.
It was easier when I was on my own because if I didn't make enough money, it was only affecting me. When
Mm.
we had to both draw money from it, from a project, we couldn't afford to not state up front. So I don't know if this is right or not, but what I generally do is I really push a client to give me a budget or give me a sense of what they're willing to spend. Not that I'll meet it, but just because I don't want to waste their time or mine if they have like,
Yeah.
$2,000, because I've done a lot of pitches only to find out that my number is like 10 times as much as the client has.
Exactly. Yeah, and I am going to be answering the question, should you ask for their budget, actually, in part of the conversation. Laura.
There we go. Okay. So I used to similarly hate the money conversation, and now it's my baseball bet to get things done.
Mhm.
Because it sort of cuts out all the sort of weird back and forth of trying to figure it all out, but also just comes in like I'm not playing around, and it's like, okay, like it's like, tell me your budget. And and if folks go like, I don't really have it, I'm like, look, listen, you have a universe where you want to play in, otherwise you wouldn't have emailed me. And so it just puts me in a much better position of strength. Similarly, I used to have a partner like Felicia, and it becomes a pain in the behind. And it's like, you come up with a number that you could want and then go higher than that, so that if you get somewhere in between, you're super happy. And so I've taken that approach over the last couple of years, and it's been much more beneficial and much less stressful in terms of the project we have to do.
Absolutely. Excellent. Anyone else? Adrian, then Margina, and then Elizabeth.
Sure. So I also used to hate the money conversation, especially with regard to when I was working full time. And when the money conversations came up in a full-time capacity, whether for a new job or a promotion, it always felt impossible to get the power into your hands, right? Like you're negotiating your whole worth. You're not just negotiating money for work. At least that's how it felt to me.
Mm.
And when I moved a few years ago into working independently, I really grew to love it a lot more. And I'm trying to be even better at it because it was only me, and I was able to, it was only me, and it was only the work at hand for the money being paid for it being discussed in kind of that more consulting relationship. And it really made me feel a lot more able to speak to the value someone is getting for the money they should pay for it. And it's been really fun to experiment with that over the past few years. So I'm really excited to keep learning and growing there.
Excellent. Beautiful. Margina.
Fortunately, I have never been uncomfortable talking about money. Maybe it was part of the way that I was raised, but I realized a long time ago that you have to sell people on your value. I worked in manufacturing years ago, and I went to my boss one day and asked for this to get approval to lower our price on a product so that I could close an order. And he looked at me and he said, there will always be somebody cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be about something other than money, because
Right.
you lose them once you start talking about it. And that clicked with me. So everything's always been based on value. And even if their budget isn't close to what is realistic for the project, I try to then educate so that I can close the gap, because a lot of times they have more money than they're saying they have.
Oh yeah, usually they do. Absolutely.
So
excellent. Thank you, Margina.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, and then Alexa.
So-
You're muted. Wait.
Sorry.
Elizabeth is first, and then Alexa.
Sorry, I was finishing chewing my lunch.
No
Sorry about
problem.
that. No, just really quickly, what I learned, I'm in education, and
Mhm.
it's tricky because usually the first sentence a new family will say to me is, we don't have much money. It almost always starts with that, and particularly with education, right? It's like, particularly public school families, we don't have much money, and that implies can you give us a deal? Can you give us a break? We want your services, but we don't want to pay for it. And usually what I start off with in my little spiel is I'm very clear that I'm for profit, very clear. And I say to parents right off the bat, I do a lot of pro bono, and I work with a wonderful organization that I'll give a little shameless PR for, called the Baton Rouge Youth Council. Coalition. I should get the C right? Since I work with them
You're
all
gonna
the
promote
freaking
it, yes.
time. Like, pretend I didn't say that. And they help get Black students to college, which is one of my huge pro bono missions. Is I was trying to do that in New York City. I couldn't give my services away. Baton Rouge Youth, they love me. The kids love me. The organization loves me. I'm like, fine, I'm going to Louisiana. I'm going to give my services to Louisiana. So when I'm working with families for money, I'm working with them for money.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear with that, what I give away and who I give it away for free. And you know what? I don't like to reduce or cut rates or offer deals. So I either give it away for free, 100% free, or I charge what I charge.
Right.
So I'm very clear with that. Like I really try not to mix that messaging up in my own head, or for, as Felicia will know, very good friend, I just worked with her daughter, she paid full freight, that even with friends, this is what I do, so I don't know if that's helpful to anyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and I do agree with the idea of, it's not about not discounting. I think there are situations where it makes sense to discount or adjust the scope of a project if you're going to adjust the fee, of course. But often pro bono instead of full freight does make sense. All right, let's do one more comment and then I'll come back to the conversation. So Alexa, talk to us.
Great. I would say, to answer your initial question in regards to how comfortable I am, having the money conversation, I would say, through my job as, a business development leader at the agency, it's something that I've become increasingly more comfortable with. Prior to having to be in a role where it is my sole responsibility to, draft our scopes, think through resourcing, really think through a budget, it wasn't in my nature to feel comfortable in that regard, but it has definitely made me confident in having such conversations. That being said, I think that the struggle, as other people have mentioned thus far, is in, when understanding the budget of a client, for example, having that either align with or not align with the work that is realistically needed to be done, to align with the results that are intended and the objective of the project. And I think that has been the biggest struggle on my end is, as an agency, we want to put forth our best work and produce the best results for our clients, but sometimes their budgets don't align with the process that we would need to take to ensure that success. So it's a bit of give and take, as you just mentioned, understanding the budget, then if, it needs to be lowered, then the scope needs to be, adjusted accordingly. I think the biggest frustration is often clients not understanding, how a budget can be lowered, but needing to also adjust the scope. So, I'm excited to dive in today about, potentially ideas around, how can we present budgets, because maybe there is a more effective way to start that conversation off. Also, I know you mentioned you're going to dive into, should you even ask, what their budget is? I think that is something that we like to do to kind of set expectations from the start, but curious your thoughts and if there's maybe a more effective approach to have that conversation.
Yeah, and what I'm not going to be able to go into too much is the relationship between marketing and money, which is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, because, and maybe, eventually I'll do a session, I'll develop a session on that idea itself, because it is a really important one. And if, for example, as Elizabeth said, the first thing out of a client's mouth is, we don't have a lot of money, you may be talking to the wrong person or the wrong market. And that means you have to do more in the marketing to attract the right people, the people who aren't going to start with that conversation. The other thing I would say, and maybe this is for you, Alexa, or anyone else really marketing something that is not themselves, that's one of the things that makes it also very tricky. Even if it's your services, there is a personal connection between you and what you offer, and you and what you do. And when it comes to the money conversation, it seems to me, you have to be able to make that separation and talk about it as if it's not you, because it is not. And actually, I think that's a good segue to my next part of the presentation. So let me share my screen again and come back to this idea that the money conversation starts with what you say to yourself. So when I think about the money conversation, you know, the obvious part is what you say to the client or the prospect or the vendor or the employer, whoever it is. But before that, it's what we say to ourselves. And I think these are the places where the problems start. So I hear a lot of people say, I'm not a business person, especially women don't see themselves as business people. Or they say, I don't like talking about money. And a lot of people fit that description, not just women, men and women. And also just to always keep in mind that the people you're negotiating with may not like talking about money. Often, and I find this especially with creative professionals and artists, that you don't like putting a price on your work. And that relates to the idea that you have to separate yourself from your work because it feels sometimes like you're putting a price on yourself. And some of you have already used the words worth and value. And I am going to go into some detail about that because I think that's where some of the misunderstanding gets in the way as well. But I also hear almost what I think of as an employee attitude from people who are self-employed when you think I have to give them, meaning the one who's got the money, the one who's got the power, what they're asking for. And I personally think that we have to give ourselves what we need first. And that's why I like this hashtag me first. And when I say that, I mean money, of course, but time and process. And actually, I had a client yesterday, a man who had a discovery call with his client for the first time. And the guy, the client, was looking at his phone and just totally disrespecting and disregarding what he was trying to present. And it reminded me of this idea that we need to give ourselves what we need first. And that's what's most important. Because if you don't value your services, who will? You can't expect the market to, especially if you don't first. But then that raises the question of what exactly is your value? And people talk about this and use the word value, I think, without thinking too deeply about what it actually means. So that's what I want to go into now. And then we'll talk a little bit more about it in breakouts. So the first thought here is the question, what are you really selling? And I think no matter what you're selling and whose services or products it is, often, especially if you're interacting with someone, you're starting with your brain. You're selling your thought process, the way you think about something, the way you approach a problem or a situation. And we don't want to disregard that aspect of it because that's kind of the only thing that sets us apart from other people who say they do what we do. So don't underestimate the value of your brain. And also the way you work and the way you approach your work, which I hope is predictable and reliable and caring. And that phrase actually comes from a conversation I heard on a podcast this weekend on Being. Krista Tippett was talking to an anthropologist. His name is Augustine Fuentes, and he talked about the importance of predictability and reliability, and he used the word compassion. But I really wanted to bring it into this conversation because I think that is one of the things we are selling. Also, don't disregard your history, your experience, your knowledge of the world, especially if you are older. A lot of people imagine age discrimination and therefore disregard their history, their experience, and their knowledge of the world. And I think that's there's a lot of value there. And that means you have to find the people who value it. Likewise, you're selling your responsiveness and your quick turnaround if that's what's necessary. And yes, of course, your skills and your product as well. But that's not the only thing. And I think often people focus too much on the actual deliverable, which again could be very similar to the other deliverables that the competition is selling. But there are all these other elements that flesh out and are part of what you want to be marketing and selling. And then we want to think about, well, okay, so this worth, what is all of that worth? versus the idea of what are you worth? And those are two very different questions. And I'm making a distinction between worth and value also. So what is your worth? I think it's totally subjective and probably does not even exist. I think if it doesn't exist, it depends on industry standards. So you need to know what the industry, how they value and what value and worth they put on the services or products that you're selling. It also depends very much on when and how you quote prices and what your proposals look like and the conversations that you have before you talk about money. And it also depends on whether and how you demonstrate your value, because I do think it's important to demonstrate your value before you start talking about money. Otherwise, they won't know what the money relates to. So then the question, the thing to determine is, what is your value? And the idea here that I've been trying to articulate, so I'm going to try again, is that it kind of has nothing to do with you. That's really what I want to say about it. It's less, maybe it's less about you and more about the person who is the one doing the valuing. So that means it's specific to each client and customer and prospect, and that it's different from your worth, but also totally subjective, and that it must be demonstrated. Otherwise, I found this phrase recently, absence blindness sets in. And absence blindness basically means if you don't show it, they won't know it. People are blind to the things that are absent. So you must demonstrate your value, the value that they value, before they're going to pay what you want to charge. So what is that? Especially if it's different for each person that you talk to. And so then the practice becomes, can you listen for what they value? Because that becomes your value. And this has to be done, I think, in conversation, in the money conversation. But before you bring up the money part, this is you demonstrating your value, asking good questions, and listening for your value. So these are just a couple examples of the kinds of things people might value. So they might value you as a strategic partner or as a thinker. So that goes back to the idea that your brain has value. And I think, again, many people, men and women, underestimate and underrate the value of their strategic approach to something and give it away or throw it in with the deliverable. So you don't want to do that, especially if you're talking to someone who especially values that. You want to make sure they pay for it. Perhaps they value you as a professional as opposed to an amateur. Certainly there are plenty of amateurs of every stripe out there. And I was on a call earlier where there were several coaches and they were talking about the fact that anyone can hang up a shingle as a coach. And so how do you know if someone is a professional coach, a coach that's qualified, right? And how do you know if the person you're talking to even cares about that? Because sometimes the relationship is all that matters and your qualifications don't matter, but you wouldn't know, and that's different from one person to another. They might also value your experience as an industry insider, whether that's your industry or theirs. Maybe that's the same, maybe that's different. Or, and this is different, your experience as an industry veteran. If you've been in the industry a long time and they're brand new to it, then that may have value. Perhaps all they care about is getting something done fast. And so the only thing they value is quick turnaround. Are you quick? Or what else? That's something to think about. And actually, this is when we're going to have a little discussion and do some breakouts. So let me stop sharing. And the idea, the question, the prompt here is, what is your value and to whom? That's what I want everyone to talk about. So maybe we'll have a few comments before we go into breakouts. Does anyone want to comment on anything else I've said? So Felicia.
So
Nancy.
Maybe we'll talk about this later. One of the things that I find is I get referred So I'm sure you're going to talk about this because, well, maybe you're not.
Maybe
'cause
not.
This is marketing.
Don't assume.
Yeah. This is marketing, so you may not. But so my company's often referred to CEOs and startups by their board because their board of directors sees something that they need. And so I spend the first part of my relationship with the client trying to explain what I offer and why it's valuable. Because the board will just say, you need this, go talk to this person. And then these poor people are like, humming. They don't know how to put a value on what I do because they didn't even know that they needed it.
Right.
So then it becomes like, how much work do you invest in
That's marketing,
educating
definitely.
someone
Yep.
before you can actually talk about price? But anyway, that was just something I've
Yeah.
been thinking about based on, what you've taken us through.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is marketing for sure. Nancy.
So what I find is people generally come, I get a lot of referrals as well. People come to me and they say, you designed this logo for this architect firm. We want you to design one for us. And it was, of course, 15 years ago that I did that. And we know what they paid. And I'm like, doesn't really matter what they paid. So what I do is I have a talk with them about what value I do bring to it as somebody who's been in the industry for, a ridiculously long time. But I also tell them other things that they can have that will enhance what they're asking for. Because it's not just about a logo, it's about brand discovery and things like that. And the same thing when someone comes to me and says, I had someone recently say, we have $5,000 for a brochure. So we talked about it and I said, went back and I made the proposal, but I only was charging $3,000 for the brochure because I felt they needed all of these other things. They ended up signing the budget with me for about $10,000. So because I really saw a need, which showed me value that they could see what more I could bring to them. So you have to not just give them what they ask for, but enhance it a little bit.
Exactly. And in a way that's connected to what Felicia was saying, right? People don't know what they don't know, right? There's so many unknowns, unknown unknowns that is an educational marketing process, and it can be done in a proposal. It can be done in an initial, vetting call. There are lots of different ways to do it.
And I mean, I did risk a chance that they were going to say, okay, we'll just do the brochure for $3,000.
Yep.
But I didn't think that they would. And if they did, I was still making enough money for what I was going to be doing.
Yeah, no, that's smart. Anyone else want to comment on that before we go into little breakouts? I'm looking. Okay. So here's my thought, Nancy. Let's do breakout rooms of 3 for 10 minutes.
3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2 breakout rooms, 3 breakout rooms, 4 breakout rooms. Okay, so some saying 6 breakout rooms. I'm having it assign us automatically.
Yeah, do random.
Yep.
And then if you can leave me out, I don't think I need to be in a breakout room.
I have no idea how to leave you out. It's not giving me that option.
All right, it's okay. Go ahead. Let's see what happens.
Ilise, what was the prompt again?
Oh, the prompt is, what is your value and to whom? I'll put it in the chat. Sorry. What is your value and to whom? I mean, you can talk about anything I've said so far or anyone has said so far, but that is, here.
And if you haven't gone in a breakout room before, you kind of go into like a quasi nowhere land for a minute. Yes. So here we go. They gives them a minute to come back.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
I'm better late than never.
Laura, what you don't know is that Zoom canceled the meeting.
I saw that.
Yeah, so it was, and you weren't on the registered list, so.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Thank you. And I had to get like my 3rd computer that my son, I don't know where he put it. I finally found it. In order to get on, I had to find my Mac somewhere. None of my PCs would let me in. Crazy. Okay, I'm going on mute.
Yeah, and we're going to take a little bio break until the top of the hour. So if you need to do that, go ahead. Bio break until the top of the hour in case you need to do that.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I
Elise?
said bio break.
Oh, bio
until
break.
The top of
We got
the
3
hour.
minutes? Okay, got it.
3
Okay.
minutes, right.
3 minutes.
Oh,
I will
bio break. Nice.
Oh, bio break. Love it.
Take
Okay,
it. Do what you need
Just
to
thinking
do.
about like the facelift I'm gonna get right here.
Maybe don't-
Felicia, just, there's some tape.
Really?
There's actually tape you can put back here, your hair cover it, it'll pull everything tighter. Seriously,
Seriously,
there's
Margina?
all sorts of tricks.
Okay.
There's lifts you can put in here, hide in your hair, lift everything up too.
I love it. Or I could just sit like this. I could sit like this on every Zoom call.
Yeah, but yeah, there's
Who
yeah,
makes
there's
them?
there's-
3M?
no. It's actually, the Koreans and Asians been using stuff like this for a while. So yeah, so literally it's adhesive. It just lightly pulls everything back so that it looks, so you have a neck of a 25-year-old.
I think you need to put that in the chat.
Yeah, I think so too. It's
Okay,
either
Margina.
that or position your camera up higher and then.
Yeah. Oh,
And then
that's-
just show it.
Yeah.
Margina, look, there's your value. You know all the secrets. All the, now you can see
I'm the information person. Usually I know the answer or know the person that knows the answer. So people come to me a lot for solutions. So like ask her, she knows, or she knows the person that knows.
Okay, I'm
So-
making note of that. Can we put that in the chat?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up for you right now.
You
Yeah.
must
And
be
so-
related to Laura.
Yeah, I know. Same way.
Oh yeah, no,
So-
Laura and I have a mutual respect on that. It's like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
okay. Solution driven.
I just solve your problems. Okay, so I have to make an introduction. So Laura M, meet Laurel. I just chatted you guys because you all should chat offline because you do things that are very symbiotic in the
Oh,
world of
okay.
food and restaurants. So run along.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Okay.
And Laura M, I feel like I know you. I used to work for Danny Meyer. Why do I feel like I know you? Did I meet you through, maybe I met you through Laura Mignot. Did I?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, we just
no.
met.
We're both Laura.
You just
M's,
met.
Yeah,
So
we
I
just
know your
met.
name from somewhere. And I've been working in the restaurant industry on and off over the years. I don't know why your name sounds so familiar.
I'm in California. Does that help anybody? No.
Oh,
Well, you are food and beverage, so that might have something. That might be why you guys might have
Maybe.
cross paths.
And I go to California, so this is a perfect match.
Okay. good.
wait, Blue Smoke closed?
Yeah.
Oh my
really?
God.
That Eva just sent that around.
Yeah.
Oh, bummer.
Really the end of an era.
You guys, I used to work with them.
I used to fight with them.
I used to eat there.
You used to fight with Mark Maynard, right?
Well,
Okay, the link is in chat.
Thank you,
You're
Margina.
welcome.
Okay, we're at 2:00, so bio break is over. I am going to ask people also to put their LinkedIn in the chat. And Elise is ready to
That's
take
good.
us
Will
back.
you put mine in there, Nancy?
I will put yours there.
I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, ladies, welcome back. Anyone want to share what came up in the discussion before I move on? Anything interesting?
It's difficult to talk about ourselves, and we all kind of talked around it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I thought it was a lot easier to talk about the for whom part and their exact need that they're looking to fill than it was to answer how I filled that need, which I guess kind of goes off of Felicia's point.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, it should make it easier to focus on the for whom first, and then just,
Right.
segment or tailor your value to them.
Right, it can
Rather than-
change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it should.
it can change.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right. Amy?
Yeah, I feel like when I was saying it out loud, trying to describe the value to my clients, I had examples of where I could see the value to past clients, but I have a hard time, I guess, in the money conversation, explain that to a potential client. And I also think that there's sort of a gap, and maybe that's where better marketing can come in. I might be able to, have case study website, but maybe make them more about, like we talked about, ROI, or folding in some tangible, instead of just a redesign, like what did that redesign do for that company? And maybe just having that on the website could sort of help me in the conversations.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, I mean, especially in case studies, you want to emphasize the problems that the people who are coming to you came to you had, and that you solved, and then emphasize in the conversation how they have the same problems, and therefore you know how to solve those problems. But I mean, I understand that in the money conversation, especially, it's challenging because you have to make sure you get the information you need first in order to present the value. You have to know what they value. And that basically requires asking all sorts of questions before you start talking. Yes. All right, good. All right, so now we're gonna get a little bit more practical. And I'm gonna share my screen again. So we're gonna kind of do a similar approach. I'm gonna talk a little bit, and then I think then we'll go to breakouts again, random threesomes, and then we'll come back and share a little bit. So share my screen. All right, so the practical. So as I said, I do love the money conversation, and I think part of it is because I prepare for it. And I think part of why a lot of people don't love the money conversation is kind of related to what we were just saying with Amy, is that you're not prepared, or you have to be very in the moment and trust yourself in the moment that you're going to say the right thing. And I think I have a slide about this later, but it seems appropriate now. I have one client who basically said, I hate the money conversation because I either blurt or I freeze. And I thought that was particularly relevant, and that sometimes it depends on the other person who you're talking to, whether you blurt or you freeze, or maybe you're just a blurter, or maybe you're just a freezer. But I think preparation can really help. So how can you prepare for the money conversation? Often it's just a question of thinking and knowing what you need. And so this goes back to what I said earlier about how you have to know what you need. You have to know what your parameters are, write them down on a piece of paper if you need to, your floor. Yes, as I said, someone was going to knock on my door and deliver something while I was presenting. Can you hold for 1 second? I'll be right back.
I thought that was part of the presentation.
When
So did I.
It just happened so smoothly. I was like, wait, what just happened?
when we were when you guys were in the breakout rooms, she goes, I was telling her a story how all of my packages lately been delivered to my neighbor and it's not walkable. And she said, oh, that'll happen during the presentation.
Oh
And
no,
sure
that's
enough, it
too
did.
funny.
I just knew that was going to happen. I know. It's bizarre. All right, thank you. So go back here. I know what I was saying though. So the idea of preparing for the money conversation by knowing your floor and your ceiling, the floor being as low as you will go and the ceiling being as high as you might start. And usually your ceiling should be higher than you think it should be, maybe even double what you think it should be, because it's important to start high so you can come down. That's a standard negotiating tip. But in one of my groups, actually yesterday, someone was talking about a win that she had in negotiating and being very in the moment in the money conversation. And so we asked her, why did it go well? And she said, because beforehand, I just wrote down what I thought, what I imagined it was going to cost. So I was ready. So that reinforced for me the idea that if we prepare, if we take the time to prepare, and that sounds easy, but actually isn't these days. So So I just want to emphasize how important that is, to take the time to prepare and know what your numbers are. And if you are not feeling it in the moment, always be ready to say, I need some time to think about it. And sometimes when I give this piece of advice, someone will say, but I don't want them to think I'm not professional and I should be able to talk about money perfectly in that conversation. And I think, no, not necessarily. But if you are worried about what they're going to think, then maybe you say, I always sleep on it. This is my practice. This is my policy. I always sleep on it. And then I'll come back to you and I'll tell you what I think, or I'll give you a quote. But this is all part of taking control of the money conversation, of leading. And I think also it's really important to slow down the money conversation so that you have the time to ask the questions, to demonstrate your value, and to prepare them for the number that you're going to give. And so whether, like Felicia, it's going to be, you know, a board that you're going to have to educate first, that may be the way it is, or just one person who maybe is already pre-sold, but you want to make sure that they know what they're buying. Or I have another situation in my mind where people are overly excited and think they know what they're buying and are ready to put the money down immediately. That to me is a red flag. So again, I think you want to slow things down and control people's expectations and make sure that they know what they're getting for how much. And I think all of that is part of the preparation. But certainly getting the money conversation started is the hardest part. For a lot of people, although I actually don't think it's that hard if you prepare and have a couple things in your back pocket to say. And one of my favorites is simply, let's talk about money, right? We've talked about this, we've talked about the fun things, let's talk about money. Again, I think they will thank you for being the one to bring it up. You can also use a little humor. You can say, okay, now everyone's favorite part of the conversation, let's talk about money. That can work well. And as I said, I love it. This client of mine who said, I either blurt or I freeze. And if you know that about yourself, then what do you need to do to make sure you don't blurt, or that you don't freeze, or that you know how to recover from the blurting or the freezing, or to do it in a way that no one notices. Now, here I have a couple of questions that often people are asked and ways to respond. And so this may or may not apply depending on what you're offering, but just take it and translate it, if possible, into your situation. So, you know, often one of the first questions that a client will ask has to do with the money. And to me, that's a red flag also, if they want to know first what the price is before they even know what you're offering, or if they think they know what you're offering. Or this is kind of related, I think, to also what Elizabeth said about people starting with, I don't have a lot of money. Again, a red flag. But if someone says, what's your hourly rate? What's your day rate? You know, what is the time for services rate? Sometimes I think, this is the Southern influence now on me, bless their heart, they don't know any better than to ask that. So you have to not necessarily accept the premise of the question if that's not the best way for you to price. And so my general advice for how to respond to what's your hourly rate, because I don't think that's the best way to price in most situations, is that that's not how I work, right? Again, I have a process, I have a policy, this is how I work. It's better for both of us if I give you a fixed price, and that way you will know how much it will cost, and what's implied is I will know how much I'm going to earn. So there are many different variations on this, but the idea, the problem with hourly rates, in my opinion, again, in general, there are exceptions, is that the quicker you get, the less you make. The quicker you are, the better you get, the less you make. And it really doesn't value your thought process and your experience and your history and everything that you bring to the table in addition to the services that you're offering. So I think it's better to have some kind of fixed rate or packages to choose from. And I know a lot of you already have those things in place, but this is just a simple way to respond to what's your fill in the blank. And another version of this question is, how much is a blank, fill in the blank, a website, a consultation, well, actually not a consultation, a deliverable, a brochure, how much is a blank? And of course, you could say, and sometimes this does add a little levity, right? That's like asking, how much is a car or how much is a house? It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what your goal is for this website. So tell me more, slow it down. Tell me more. Let me ask you some questions. Let me demonstrate my value. You could say that. You don't have to say that. But you could. It would be interesting, actually. And then we'll talk about how much a website is. So here's the question that came up. Should you ask for their budget? I used to say, yes, ask for their budget. And then what happened was people would ask for the budget and the client, the prospect, would say, well, we don't know, or we don't have one, or we're not telling you what it is, some variation of that. And my client, the creative, would back away, would back off. The client would say, just send me a proposal. We don't have a budget, just send us a proposal. And that is the worst possible thing, actually, because you have no idea what they're thinking. You have no idea if you're on the same page money-wise. And so the point is, you should only ask for their budget if you're prepared with how to respond when they say, we don't know, because you definitely need a number or a range before you go away and spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time doing some work on their behalf. And I do believe, I have seen it with my own eyes, that numbers are magical. And what happens, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that as soon as there are some numbers on the table, they suddenly know their budget, the budget they didn't know they knew or didn't know they had. So the ways to do that, I have a couple approaches that you could experiment with. One is that you give them a spectrum. You could say, are you thinking 500, 5,000, or 50,000? Those are the numbers I like to use, but you can use any numbers. You could say 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, depending on what you're selling. But the point here is not that these are my prices. That is kind of obvious, but you could be explicit about it. These are not my prices. It wouldn't be 500, 5,000, or 50,000. This is the spectrum, and I need you to tell me where on this spectrum you are. And this is magical. Often people will say, oh, 5,000. No, definitely not. Or 50,000. Of course not. Or we were thinking somewhere between 5 and 10. Right? So you'll get them to reveal a little bit more. But sometimes this won't do it. And another approach is you could give them a choice. So you could say something like, are you thinking in the hundreds or the thousands? You're asking here, how many zeros are in your head, essentially. And sometimes they will know. Because I do believe that the good ones, the good clients, and they're not all good ones, and you need to be able to discern quickly who are the good ones. And you need to know who you're looking for so that you can attract them. Again, that's a marketing issue. But the good ones do want to pay a fair price. And they expect to negotiate. So if you don't negotiate, you will be perceived as an amateur at best, and they will walk all over you at worst. Because I do think that one of the problems with the money conversation and negotiation is that it is often perceived as a confrontation. You go in defensive. You go in as if you're going to have to defend your life, as if you really want or need this client, this project, this thing to happen, and you're going to defend against them trying not to give to you. I think actually negotiation is a little bit more like a dance. I won't say which dance, but I did have a client recently when I asked her about the negotiation status of a project she has been negotiating for several months, actually. She said, we are still waltzing around the dance floor. And I just love that image. And I do think if you can come to it with that image, it might be easier to do. But I also like to say that negotiation is more a conversation than a confrontation. And so again, if you approach it as a conversation, you will do much better at it. And before you initiate that conversation, and you should be the one to initiate that conversation, you need to know what you need. So that leads me to the 7 worst negotiating mistakes. And just so you know, I'm going to plant the seed now for the breakout conversation will be around which, if any, of these negotiating mistakes you have made, and maybe tell some stories about the consequences or what's your best negotiating trick or situations where it's worked well. You can share that information. But I call these the worst negotiating mistakes because they're not the biggest. They're actually the smallest, most imperceptible, and therefore the easiest to ignore, and therefore the most lethal. So mistake number one is when they put a number on the table, you just take it. You take whatever's offered. That is their floor. They're not going any lower. And if you just take it, not only will you be perceived as an amateur, and sometimes you just take it because you just don't want to have the conversation. So you just take it and then it's over. You can move on to the thing you love. But also it means, you know, using that cliche, you may be leaving money on the table and you would never know it. So I always say, ask for more. And this is not the kind of cavalier double it thing that often people say, but I am suggesting that you should always ask for more, because then the parameters of your negotiation are set. There's the number they put, and there's the number you responded with, and you're going to find a compromise in between.
Ilise, can I ask a question about that?
Of course, Nancy.
So, you know, I've been, as you know, following you for a while. And so I often ask for a budget and then they say, well, I don't know. And I say, you know, I like to say $500, $5,000, $5 million, because I think it makes it funny. They just say, sometimes they say, we're just not sure. Give us a price. So I work up a quote and then crickets. You don't hear from them. And I reach back out and they say it was too much money. And they don't do a dance. They just disappear. So how do you bring them back into the fold when something like that happens?
All right, I'm gonna come back so that I can see y'all in order to answer that. Because this might be, you know, worth a conversation, because I do think that happens a lot. Now, I would insist, you know, I would keep pushing basically. And I would say something like, all right, if I said to you, it's going to be $10,000, is that going to be too much for you? Right? Can you get them to say no to this or yes to this, or some kind of response to a number that you're going to put on there? And I do think you can explain to them why you're being so insistent, right? And you could even say what you just said to us, right? Here's what happens when I do that. Oh. Marjorie.
Yeah, I just want to interject because I've had that happen to me a lot too. And I've started to say, you know, I just don't do proposals without having a range in mind anymore. And that kind of says also, Nancy, that I'm too experienced for me to like go spend my time, you know, writing a proposal for you if you're not going to give me any kind of, you know, dart to shoot for, you know, or sorry, bullseye to shoot for, you know.
I like that.
Yeah.
But I have another question, which is like, Ilise, which is, you know, sometimes people will say to me, listen, I've got X amount of dollars. That's what I've got. And I hear you when you're saying ask for more. So in that case too, do you think I'm leaving money on the table?
What I would suggest in that case, that's when options make sense, to give them options to choose from. And the lower option is the thing they said they had, the budget they said they had. I've got $5,000. All right, here's what I'll do for 5,000. But if you have 10, here's what you could get. And then sometimes if you've made the argument for why, it's kind of like what Nancy was saying she did with the, you know, the brochure that ended up being 3,000, but then she sold them on more things and they actually had more money. So I think yes, definitely you use it as a, you know, as a center for the rest of the offer.
And they rarely go for the lowest option.
Right. They know, because they know, you know, they don't want to be cheap. They don't want to be perceived as cheap.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
but you know,
hold on. Laura at Missouri had a question, and then the other Laura. and then Felicia. Felicia, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
I was just going to say to your point, Nancy, because I've been in that situation a bunch of times too. And sometimes I get the feeling that they don't want to tell me what their budget is because they think that I should be able to be telling them how much something costs. So it's a weird kind of a dynamic.
As if there's a going rate, as if there's you buy it on the shelf and here's how much it is.
Right. So I would say, well, all of our projects are custom and I go through that whole thing. But then I say, and this has really worked well, projects similar to what you're asking us to do usually range between X and Y. And then you're not even like telling them how much theirs is going to be, but you're saying, well, website or, whatever brochures that we've done cost, between $3,000 and $5,000. Does that sound like something that's in your budget? And then they'll tell you, well, that's more than I thought, or yes, that's okay. And then if you give them a wide enough range, then that works good.
Excellent. And actually, Laura, I'm going to come back and ask you to tell your story that I love. So hold that thought. We'll go to Laura and then Felicia.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I had this circumstance a couple of weeks ago where I gave him up. He didn't know what his budget was. So I gave him 3 options. And then he took the cheapest option, but then changed it. And then I said, well, you don't get what's in option B or C with option A. Like there is no combination where you can do that.
Right.
And they, okay, I'll go with the cheapest option. And so I'm like, okay, fine. Well, that one, you had to pay the whole thing up front. And I haven't heard from him since.
Yeah,
so I'm like, you know what? And it was one of those things where it's like, it came through a really good referral, like a really good friend of mine. And I was like, and I, was like, I kind of wanted to be nicer about it. But then I was like, you know what, dude, this is not like a joke. And if you want this work done, then you have to pay for it. And I'm like, I'm not lifting a finger to help you because you're a nice guy. And, it's like the first time I've been like, yep, bye, dude, on to the next. So yeah, you do sort of come to that point of like, yeah, knowing value.
Absolutely. Felicia.
I was going to mention that one thing I learned, not through any great wisdom, but just by testing things out, is if you listen very carefully when they tell you their budget, they either sound embarrassed that it's small or they sound like they're trying to get away. Like sometimes you can hear in their voice that they're not comfortable giving you the number. And so what I've started to do is I'll always go substantially above that number, because if it is in fact what they have, we can negotiate it back, and then they think they're getting a deal, and then they feel really good about their negotiation. Or if they've been lowballing you and they kind of know and they're trying to get away with it, then they're like, all right, I guess that's what it really costs. So it's been interesting, but I've learned I used to try to please with my numbers and always come in so that I look like a great value for your money, and now I always bid up, because it's going to come down anyway.
Yes, absolutely. But what did you want to add?
Yeah, so it was interesting listening to both Felicia and Marjorie. So one of the things that I've started to do this year is the pandemic forced me to get comfortable with talking about money. It's like, you have to take care of yourself, and I'll define what I do pro bono. No one else defines it. So it was that. And the other thing, and it's happened like in the past few weeks, one was with an investment house and the other was with a library. And they were like, this is what we have. And I was like, you know what? Why don't you talk with your team? And everything is negotiable. But like it was creating that sense of comfort. Why don't you come back to me with what you can do. And I'll throw in a couple of things which no one else can. Nothing is that new. I am not reinventing the wheel. But I think just by saying that, in both the cases, it was like this comfort where no one felt that, oh, I'm feeling small or I have to get defensive. Everyone at least pretended or felt that they've had the space. Maybe it was that one person in HR who's handling the whole thing, but they needed me to know that they have to talk to the VP of finance. And I'm like, I get it. You do that. I'm not going away anywhere. And Marjorie, I love that. I was like, and I'll send in the proposal when we kind of get talking about the price. And it worked in both those instances. They were like, oh yeah, we'll match your price. but they always start with the lowballing thing. And in the past, I would have been, at least someone is paying me. Instead of valuing myself, it would be like, thank God. So yeah,
Good.
just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. And Marjorie, I see your question there, but I'm going to keep going and then come back to it at the end. All right. All right. Because we've got, and we're ending at 3, right, Nancy? Okay. All right. That's fine. I'm just going to talk fast. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. So that was mistake number 1. We have 6 more to go. Mistake number 2 is when you make the first offer that you don't start high enough. We just talked about that, right? Your ceiling. And we've said, Felicia said, so many people said, you want to give yourself room to negotiate. So I don't think I need to belabor that one. It's really important. I guess I would just say people are afraid sometimes to scare the client away by starting high. And to me, this is why it should be a real-time conversation, not a negotiation via email, because then you can, as I like to say, hear them fall off their chair when you give them the high number, and then they can get back on their chair and you can talk about how you come down and what that means. Mistake number 3 is when you make assumptions about what they can and cannot pay. And this, the solution to this one obviously is a no-brainer. You ask instead of assuming, but you'd be surprised how many people and how often people just assume, oh no, they've got no money. Actually, this is a perfect opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing my screen to go to Laura to tell her little story, if you don't mind, because she had made an assumption about what the guy could pay. So just quickly tell us your story.
Okay.
Laura.
So this is about almost 10 years ago, but someone came into my office and they were launching a new, he worked for this, for a company, but he came from Adobe. And so I knew he was used to working with creatives, but they were launching a new software program, and really all they came to us for was to kind of redesign the logo and do some email marketing for them. That was it. So while I'm having this conversation with them, I'm thinking kind of in the back of my mind, well, it's probably like, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 or something like that, or maybe it was even less, than that. And so, and I always ask, what's your budget? And usually they tell me they don't know, or you tell me, or whatever the case may be. And so just asked him, what's your budget for this? And he didn't even hesitate. And he said, well, about $100,000. I swear to God. And so I had to sit there with no expression on my face, take a breath and say, yeah, we could probably do it for that, and so, it was so far over what I was, there was no way I was going to say, well, probably 120, there just wasn't, it wasn't even in the thing. That was like my best, budget story. And so always ask what the budget is, because you never, ever know. It's never happened again, but you never, ever know what somebody, can pay.
Right. Right. And the lesson there is don't assume anything. And I when I hear that story, I love it. And, the idea that you were about to present your price without getting the information from him. Right. And so, again, that's why this conversation is so important. Talk about leaving money on the table. Okay. All right. So let me go back here. All right. Okay, mistake number 4, we talked a little bit about this already, being impulsive and blurting out numbers. And I think actually a lot of women do this when they're being pressured. Men do it too, but women especially being pressured by men. Oh, come on, just tell me how much it's going to cost. It's almost a bullying, I think. Or again, you just are impulsive and want to get it over with. And so, certain numbers come out. I've done this. And it's not impossible to recover from, but I do think the real solution is taking time to think. The recovery, I'll tell you briefly my story. It was actually with 17 hats, Nancy. A long time ago, I was negotiating with them about something, and they pushed me for a number. And so I gave them a number that was way too low. That's the problem with blurting out numbers. It could be either way too low or way too high. Mine was way too low. And I knew it the minute it came out of my mouth. And I think they knew it too, but we just kept talking. And then they said, can you write a proposal? And I said, yes. And then the next day I reached back out and I said, you know what, that number was too low. And I'd like to write my proposal for this number instead. And he said, yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead. So I'm glad I did that, but I definitely learned to take my time to think. Mistake number 5. You want to
It's
say
also
something?
nice to know that you can that you can go back to someone and say, I misspoke, or,
Yep.
you know, being put on the spot, I said the wrong amount or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like that.
Mistake number 5 is being desperate and not having a backup plan. So, you know, it's hard to control being desperate or not. Again, this is where marketing comes in my opinion. And I'm not talking here about looking desperate. I'm talking about, you know, I need this job. And that's a problem, to go into a negotiation when you actually need it. So to me, the solution here is marketing, having a backup plan. If this doesn't work, I'm going to try this, this, or this. So that even if you don't know which of those options is going to materialize, you know this is not the only thing on your plate. And that is definitely something you can do for yourself. Mistake number 6 is betraying your nervousness by talking too much. So this is like the inverse of blurting, or a relative, a cousin of blurting, where, you know, you say your number and then you don't shut up and you just keep talking. And I think that I hear a lot of people doing that. And so, you know, the simple solution there is just put your number out and then shut up and listen for the gasp, if they're going to gasp, or blink their eye, or maybe they'll say, okay, that's fine. Right? Or they'll come back with something, but you have to make the space in the conversation for them to respond, and not assume you know how they're going to respond. You may be surprised. And finally, mistake number 7 is devaluing your services by cutting your prices. And here I am not talking about starting high and coming down. I'm talking about, I have a story actually, as Nancy mentioned, I'm the business coach here at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And so I've been coaching students, and some of them are more ballsy than others, let's say. And I did have this one guy who, he's a master's student, and he was approached by a very large company who he didn't tell me who it was, but big name, big brand, that wanted him to do 9 murals. And so in the moment, he just threw out a number, $30,000. And the person he was negotiating with said, that's a little bit high. And so he said, all right, how about 15? And they said, okay. And to me, this is, you know, the mistake of an amateur. I don't fault him for it. He's very young, and he will learn. But that is an example of devaluing your services by simply cutting the price, right? He could have said, well, you know, for 20, I'll give you this many, and for 15, I'll give you this many. And then, you know, that's where the dance is. So you always want to adjust the scope if you're going to adjust the prices. And this is also where you can, you know, give options. It's really important to give options so people can choose amongst different options, as opposed to their choice being yes or no to whatever it is that you're offering. All right, so you will always be too expensive for some and too cheap for others. This was commented on earlier. But as long as you feel good about your value, your pricing will be right for those who are right for you. And this, again, is a marketing issue. We are always trying to attract the people who are right for us. We're not in the business, in my opinion, to persuade people that they should use us, or that they should spend money that they may not have or may not think is worth whatever they're spending it on. That is not your job. So let's do a little breakout, another 10 minutes of breakouts. The questions are, which mistakes do you make, if any, and or what's your best negotiating strategy or story? I will put those in the, and then we will come back and take questions, including Marjorie's question there. So if you have questions also, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. But I'm going to say, which mistakes have you made? Oops. Oh, you're doing breakout rooms. Okay. All right. Bye. 10 minutes. All right, here they come. Welcome back, ladies. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat bar. And or, you know, we can do the hand raising. So welcome back, everyone. And we're going to spend the last 10 minutes taking questions. And also, if you want to say what you learned today or what you're taking away and might do differently, that's always of interest to me. And I'll start with Marjorie's question that she put in the chat bar there. She wrote, what about prospects who keep asking for your input on their business? How to transition that conversation to, I'm happy to continue doing this, but you'll have to start paying me.
Yeah, like I have somebody who just keeps she's been emailing today. She's like, and she actually sent me somebody else's proposal, which I really have a problem with that.
Yeah.
She did that. And it's like, I really would love your feedback. I value your opinion so much, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I wouldn't ask you to do your work for free.
No,
So,
all
yeah.
you have to do, Marjorie, is
Yeah.
respond with, here's how much that would cost.
Okay.
That's really it. It is as simple as that.
That's how you handle the brain pickers?
Yeah.
So you don't say though, because your point earlier about demonstrating your value, right? There's a fine line between.
Sounds like she already values it and she's saying she does.
Yeah.
Let her prove it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and my point is more like put the money on the table and let them respond, basically. And so, I mean, there are a couple different ways to approach this. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I mean, what I do, and I'll just pitch it to you, y'all, is I offer a free 30-minute consultation mentoring session to anyone really who wants it as a way, this is how I qualify people to make sure that I am a good fit for them and they are a good fit for me. And at the end of that conversation, I will either make an offer because I think I can help and they're a good fit for me, or I won't. Because sometimes people say, well, how do you get out of that? How do you end that phone call if you don't want to work with them? It's like, I don't offer them anything. So the other benefit of doing something like that is they know it is implied that as soon as that 30 minutes is up, the clock starts ticking, right? That's when it's going to cost money to do more. So putting that boundary around it, calling it a thing, because the truth is you're going to have to talk to prospects in order to vet them anyway, generally. So you might as well call it a thing, tell them they're getting this thing for free. And that implies beyond that, you're going to pay. And so I had a guy yesterday who kept saying, well, can I just send you something for your feedback? Like, no, that's what I get paid for. And I said that to him and he said, but couldn't you just read it and tell me if it's good? Like, no, that's what I get paid for. So, I mean, sometimes you do have to hit them over the head. I'm not going to be sexist about it, but you know, often you do have to say, no, I'm sorry. This is what, and you can, sometimes I appeal to like, I can't afford to do that for you. This is how I make my living.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can understand that, right? Do you say that? I'm sure you can understand that. I can't afford to do that. But do other people have, you know, phrases they like to use or strategies for that?
I actually had a guy tell me once, maybe you didn't notice when you walked in my office, but there's not a red cross painted on my door.
God.
He said that to you?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
And I'm like, okay, message received. It's a little harsh, but it was funny.
It is a little harsh.
It is harsh. Yeah.
Oh my God. Elizabeth.
So I've, over the years, gotten pretty clear on my messaging and that I'm a very student-driven college coach. And many parents want to be very involved with their students' college journey. So I'll have chats, obviously, with the family before we engage. And I've definitely said to quite a few families, I just think that you want to be much more involved in this process than I feel comfortable with. And you want me to be more involved in your students' process than I want to be involved. This is when they ask me if I'll write the essays. And I just kind of kindly say, there's so many consultants out there. I'm sure you'll find the one whose philosophy is in sync with yours. And so I think for me, the big takeaway for myself personally was honing my own brand more and more and more, and and then kind of reviewing past crops of kids and families and kind of circling the success stories for me. I don't mean students that got into, the competitive schools. I mean successes in that everybody was happy. And my favorite takeaway is when a student writes me an email at the end and says, I'm a better writer. I just feel good about myself. Like, this was just such a great experience, so I looked at that, and then I just decided that if I get the vibe, so I guess it's very gut for me. If I get the vibe that there's going to be a lot of micromanaging from mom and dad. I had one mom send me a text in the middle of the night. She said she had a bottle of wine, and that she hacked into her students'
red flag
locked essay to read it. And she had a bunch of comments for me. So I refunded the money, and, I felt bad for the child. And, but, I felt there was a clear disconnect there. So
great. Thank you.
I think it's also being comfortable with refunding or giving it back if you're not in alignment. I don't know how many of you guys do that or feel comfortable doing that, but if it's just not working for me, cutting my losses is so much better. Maybe because I'm working with children too, that
right,
I'm particularly, it can be fraught. And so, yeah.
We just have a couple more minutes. Let's see if anyone else has questions about something else. Shweta. Yes.
Hi. So I loved the example that you shared, Ilise. During the pandemic, a college professor reached out to me, and she was like, we would love for you to give a talk on wellness, help our students, but can you please do it for free? And I was like, I would love that, but can you just teach for free? Would you do that? And she was like, no, I wouldn't. So I'm like, just think about it. This is how I pay my bills. So I think very often people assume the services that you provide, they make the assumption what it would cost. And they make the assumption that you doing it out of the goodness of your heart. Yes, there is goodness, but there are also bills to be paid. And they need subtle reminders. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
I mean, I hate to bring this up, and you were very nice about it, Ilise, but I do think more often than not, it is the male of the species who feels really comfortable asking for something. I mean, in some ways I respect it, but I think we should feel, as you're advising us, just as comfortable to say no. And again, I don't mean to be so gender focused, but it does to me, most of my male clients have no problem asking and asking and asking and changing their minds. And, this is what I love about the construction industry. And I don't know if you're all familiar with the concept of a change order. And now we'll get into contracts, but to me, when you come up with a price, the price in my proposals always has contingencies. It's this price based on having a project manager on your side, based on the fact that you will follow the process that I have laid out, based on the fact that you will pay me at these intervals. And, so I know that's another conversation, but the price is never just the price, right? The price is the price plus the conditions. And Elizabeth, to your point, I've only once had to give money back to a client because he actually scared me, and he threatened me in a way that just made me feel unsafe. But I tried to explain to him that the work we've done so far, we haven't gotten to the deliverable, but we spent hours and hours and hours working on it. And this is what my time is worth. And he said, well, my time is also worth that. And then that's where, like, to me, unless you're going to hire a lawyer or a mediator, I think it is very much easier to walk away from a conflict like that.
All right, it looks like we do need to wrap up. So I just want to thank y'all for participating, for coming and for participating. And I'll put my contact information. You're welcome. Actually, I don't have the link.
I will email your contact information with everybody's LinkedIn and also with a link to the video. I can't say I'm going to do it today.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy, Felicia, Elise, and everyone. So helpful and informative.
Yeah.
Laura,
thank
were
you.
you trying to say
How do
something?
you,
Thanks,
how do
everyone.
you copy the chat? I
Yeah,
always
you
forget
can't.
how to
No,
you can't.
I will
Oh,
be.
bummer.
I'll be sending
Okay.
that in as well.
Oh, cool.
Like,
Okay, thanks,
for,
Nancy.
for some reason,
They changed it.
yeah, they changed.
Oh, really? Okay, it's a Zoom thing. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Mhm.
Thank
so
you.
yeah, follow-up email. Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Everyone, take
Bye.
care.
Stay safe,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Yes, do.
Thank you too.
Thanks again, Elise.
Of course, Nancy.
you,
Thank you for
Elise.
inviting me. You're
See you
welcome.
Friday.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.